Hey folks, Jason Wood up here, back with another episode of By Marketers for Marketers. Before we start this one, I just wanted to let you know this episode was so great that it went long, and so I decided to split it up into two parts. So please enjoy part one now for 30 minutes, and then next week we'll release part two of this great episode with Marcel Santilli. Thanks and enjoy. Hey everybody, it's Jason Wood again. Welcome to, I think this is now episode 5 or 6 now. It's hard to keep count of By Marketers for Marketers. Here today, I am happily joined by somebody that I've spoken to quite often. He's actually a cab member of ours and a big help for me. So Marcel Santilli, the SVP of Marketing at Upkeep. Marcel, why don't you introduce yourself and the company real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Jason mentioned, I head up marketing and also RevOps and doing a little bit of everything at Upkeep. Really been at Upkeep actually today is my 1-year anniversary. So that's kind of crazy. Yeah, so it's been what a crazy year to join a company, right? But it's been quite a wild ride in good ways and obviously bumpy for all of us, but it's been a lot of fun and really, really exciting as a lot of people kind of started the year and then we didn't know what was going to happen, cut down on costs, likely going to have to lay off anyone, but being able to just really build things in a very different way than we originally thought going into the year. A little background on Upkeep. So Upkeep kind of serves the part of the market that we like to call deskless workers. And so some stats put it at about 70% of all workers are actually deskless. What it means is just they're not sitting in front of a computer like you and I. They're actually move around, which is must be nice. And so we focus on just giving tools that we're all used to maintenance teams. And so think of everything almost you touch. There's probably some maintenance team behind the scenes, whether it's maintaining a manufacturing plant, a distribution warehouse, the facilities that we go into. And so I like to think of it as something that I can relate to. So think of, you get a really nice espresso machine, right? And it says, hey, you got to do this, this, and this every so often. If you decide not to do it, maybe that's okay, saves you a little bit of time, but over time that thing is going to break and won't produce, right? So now imagine you're producing, your product, and if your manufacturing plant goes down for an hour, you lose thousands and thousands of dollars. Maybe you have to fly someone from another country to go fix it, right? And so a lot of that is super critical that we don't even think about in our day-to-day lives. So Upkeep is really about digitizing a space that has been traditionally underserved.
I like that. I need that for myself at my house.
Right.
It's kind of funny. I had this idea like years ago. I think Home Advisor does it now, maybe, and you can like sign up and it might remind you of when you need to do change your air filter or whatever.
Yeah.
I interviewed with this company, I think that ended up either acquiring them with that idea. And then all of a sudden, like 6 to 10 months later, I saw that I was interviewing for this marketing job. Like, well, what would you do? Like, what would you do with the product if, there's that thing I told them about. Who knows? It's probably already in development, but I need that thing.
My wife would say that I definitely need that reminders and other things. I'm really on top of stuff at work, and then at home, I'm not as good. So definitely something I've been working on.
Well, Marcel, I'm happy you joined me today. We've been planning this for quite a while, honestly, and I've had to postpone on you several. We're in the middle of December right now, just for people that might be listening to this whenever, middle of December 2020. So I want to thank you for being patient with me and letting me reschedule that. I've had some, there's been some interesting times going on. I've been dealing with some personal stuff in my life, and that's why I had to cancel on you last week. So I appreciate that. But it's kind of interesting, like it all ties together, right? And that's what I like about you specifically. When we first kind of talked, I could tell that you're a real person first, you know what I mean? And then a human first, and then a marketer second. And so thanks for that. I appreciate it. So how are you doing, by the way?
Good. It's been a crazy year, and it's just a little background. So the last 3 years we were renovating our house, which is kind of crazy. In that process, we decided to get a house before getting married too. So we just changed the order on everything, and then changing jobs. And luckily, we finished the project before COVID hit. And luckily, everyone is kind of healthy, and I think everyone has experienced a lot of things. But I think finishing the year has just been gratifying in some ways, and that just being thankful for health, and that you get to spend time. And I think if anything, this year just put like a focus on what actually matters, as far as like people, your relationships, friends that you really deeply care about. And in some ways that's nice, because I think the more you go in life, the more you want maybe less people, but people that are, it's kind of a two-way street, and that really matter to you, and that you kind of give back a lot to. And so this year's been kind of crazy, but it's helped focus on those things. And I think from a work perspective, and I would imagine a lot of people are in the same boat. I've never been more hands-on. I've never worked harder, and this is the last time off I've ever taken in a single year too, So in that way, I'm actually looking forward to a little break here in a week or so, for sure.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I feel like I'm on that race to the finish line, like that temporary finish line, but yeah.
It's like we're all doing 3 or 4 people's job now,
Yeah. Cool. Well, I of course forgot to introduce the topic, so I'm going to introduce the topic now, and we'll jump in. But so, Marcel and I are going to talk today about, really kind of tips. I don't want to say tricks, tips, experiences we've had growing marketing teams, building marketing teams, primarily from a startup perspective. But that's where Marcel has more experience than I do. But that's also where, we'll kind of see maybe some differences of thought. And I was telling Marcel this a little bit ago, I've worked at small companies before, but this is really my first true startup. My first time as the sole marketer, and I'm not the sole marketer anymore, thank goodness, but it was my first time as kind of as a sole marketer. The other times I worked at small companies were mainly agencies, right? So it was like, it almost doesn't count. It's a completely different, completely different beast. Yeah. And so most of my experience comes from growing teams at these big companies, and I know, Marcel, you got experience there too. And then you made the leap to startups sooner than I did, which was a smart move. And anyway, that's our topic today. So we're going to go around things like how do you prioritize your day? How do you get all of the things done that need to get done? Who do you hire first? What areas do you really need to look at when you're starting to grow the team from 1 to 2 marketers? What things are best left with agencies, freelancers, those kinds of things, versus like what things you really need to have in-house? And then to kind of go from there. Tools, maybe, some of the tools that we use to help scale ourselves.
Got a full list.
Yeah. So we'll jump right in. Maybe Marcel, maybe actually let's just do a little bit of background on the teams that we've actually kind of, just to give a little bit of context. So why don't you go ahead and go first?
Yeah, so I'll try to do a super high level, but started my career early on at IBM, and kind of fast forward a little bit, I was part of this division, IBM Security, that was started from a few acquisitions plus getting a bunch of security products into one division. So in a lot of ways, it kind of felt like a startup. But what's been interesting about my journey, both at IBM and then HP, which are, Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies, is that I've had to be really scrappy as well. And so at IBM, I built this.
Even at those larger companies.
Exactly. So to give you an idea, at IBM, we built this site called securityintelligence.com, which was kind of this off domain site, but I didn't have any headcount and very little budget. So I had to get really scrappy with agencies. At HP, I was able to build a team, and we launched a site called techbeacon.com. And it was really kind of content marketing at really large scales, doing 15 articles a week. But in that, again, a lot of restrictions around hiring, but then also being able to have flexibility in moving quickly with vendors and things like that. So I rely very heavily in Upwork and a few other tools to just being able to, move very quickly and get things done very quickly that are not normal in big enterprises. And then I was at HashiCorp for a little over 2 years, just an amazing company, great journey. And I started there, we were 100 people. 2 years later, 500. My team went from just me to about 26, give or
Oh,
take.
wow. Yeah.
And
Over how long a period of time? 2 years, you said there?
2 years, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's fast.
And
Okay,
the
yeah.
crazy thing is, we were hiring really fast, but actually getting approval for full-time employees like FTEs was a little tricky. And so I relied very much on hiring people as full-time contractors and figuring out hybrid models and then converting them to full-time employees, mostly not because I wouldn't hire them full-time, but just
Yeah.
because of how the logistics work, and also a lot of freelancers, but then building for scale, and so then as a service titan as well, rely a lot of also a hybrid model. And then at Upkeep, we are probably 50-50 right now between freelancers, smaller agencies, contractors, and then full-time employees. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I've got questions in there, but I'll go through mine real quick too, just to give context. Mine is so let's see, started my, I'll call it, management career in consulting. And so like I got into consulting, I was doing primarily, back then it was website analytics, which would have turned into marketing operations kind of later on. And so, I grew some teams, but I think growing a consulting team is it's totally different than growing a team at a company, right? At
Yeah.
client side. So that didn't really help, me. Then these are pretty small teams. It was like at Web Trends for a number of years, had my own company, kind of services thing for a little while. Then I went to Microsoft, and what's interesting about my time at Microsoft is that was similar, I think, to you at HP, is that big company, headcount was limited, so much budget for contractors, right? And I think Microsoft, when I was there, was something like 30% contractors, you know what I mean, of all the headcount. It was a ridiculously high number, and it was like interesting. So I kind of got used to that model of like, insourcing some stuff, offshoring some stuff, those kinds of things. But like most of my career has been inheriting teams and then growing those teams, so I never really had that like from really beginning to end experience. And so I don't even know I don't know what I'm doing here. I kind of do, but not really. It was my first time at it. And so that's kind of I guess we'll call that the background. Let me ask you a quick question on the oh, you know what? Never mind. I wrote something down and I can't even read my writing. So I'll come back. I'll come back to it later. Okay, so we've got these. So we both have a little bit of background. Big companies, smaller companies. So let's say we start out at a place and we're the sole marketer. So, and the rub is the product that we're selling, it has to appear, we're selling to enterprises, let's say we're selling to enterprises, we're selling to large companies. It has to at least appear that there's some good marketing going on, right? Because no enterprise is going to want to buy something from some janky, you know what I mean? Like, what are they doing? So we're the sole marketer and we have to look like a bigger team. So, I think the first problem that I had is, and I had luck just because I'm so old. I've been doing this for such a long time. I've seen it all happen around me. And so even though I was primarily in ops, but like, how do you prioritize all of the work that you have in front of you? So it's like, you got sales reps, you got sales reps coming at you for things. They all have previous experiences in what marketing worked, at the places that they've been at before. So they come to you with these ideas. You have what you know and what you want to do. How do you start to think about prioritization?
Yeah, it's really interesting because, I think one mistake that a lot of marketers make is they have a playbook and they kind of come in with preconceived notions, right? And they just kind of have this confirmation bias of just looking for things that confirm that their playbook is the playbook that they need to apply. So that's, I think, really dangerous. And so from my perspective, how I like to think about it is really understanding how strong is your product market fit, but not only that, kind of your overall go to market, and how much clarity do you have around your ideal customer profile. And the reason I say this is because even if your product is there and there's traction and people are buying, right? What I found is that there's usually some gray areas in every company I've been at, right? But especially fast growing startups, it's like, hey, this person's willing to give me a check, but should I take this check? And more importantly, if I
Right, right.
have, additional, I
Yep,
don't know, let's call it $10,000, like, do I want to spend that money on finding someone like this or no?
yep,
Right.
yep.
And so I think from that perspective, if prioritizing really depends on how much confidence do you have in that. So for us at Upkeep, one of the things we did, and COVID made it even more important to do, was just talk to a lot of customers, a lot of prospects. We actually conducted 160 interviews in a 2-month period with almost no
Oh,
budget,
wow.
right? Like we were just giving a $50 gift card as like a thank you. And we actually, instead of letting go of additional capacity on the SDR team, I moved 2 SDRs. And so we got scrappy
Yep,
at the beginning, but that really helped set the priorities for the rest of the year, as far as really understanding kind of who we're for, what kind of customers we serve better than anyone else, and who should we deprioritize, and then
yep,
adding the lens of kind of COVID and how different industries were impacted. And so I think that's one aspect of how do you prioritize your time. And then another, so it's almost like starting with the why, right?
yep, yep.
And then the other aspect I always think about, and I got this from HashiCorp when I was there, they're very principles driven company, is really thinking about effective and efficient, right? And
Mm,
so effective is about
yeah,
direction and understanding your customer, is definitely that part. Efficient is about speed, right? So you
yeah,
can go very fast in the wrong direction, and that's actually almost
yep,
worse than going very slow in the right direction, right?
yeah,
So ideally,
right.
you're doing both. And so I think about prioritization as that, but then a big aspect of it all, which I think is more important than anything else in startups, is the things you say no to are by far more important than the things you say yes to.
Mm,
And
mm,
if you can just not be reactive at the beginning, that's one of the
yeah,
hardest things to do, right? Like your month one, let's assume you're coming in, and it's like, make sure you align the expectations of, hey, I'm going to optimize for learning month one. And
yeah,
because anything you do in month one before you learn, you hire someone, there's a high chance that's going to be wrong, or the right person at the
right.
wrong time,
Yep,
right?
yep,
Any investment decisions you make, everything you do is going to not have that context, you know.
yeah.
And so try not to be reactive, versus like you start like day one. It's like, hey, we have the newsletter that has to go out tomorrow, and it's kind of broken. Can you figure that out for me? And
Right.
oh, hey, the website needs some help. I don't know what's going on. We got to launch this page. Hey, we have a launch next week. Can you? It's like, hey, pretend I'm not here for a month.
Yeah, right. Yeah. What were you doing before I was here? Yeah,
Yeah,
like keep
exactly. Just
doing that
one
for
more
a little
month
bit
without
while
me.
longer. Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. You kind of sparked something in my mind too, which was in that scenario too, you want to have perspective. You know what I mean? Because especially if you're coming in new,
Yeah,
like at that example, you don't want to be that order taker. You know what I mean? You don't want to get into that role of like, oh yeah, I'm just going to do whatever you guys want. I'm here to fulfill tactical marketing stuff. I'm here to execute marketing. You don't want to get into
yeah,
that trap. I don't think either. Um, but I think it's also what's interesting, I guess, it's also though important, I think, to have some quick wins, some early wins when you come in
that's
to
a good
get
point.
that
Yeah,
respect and trust, you know what I mean? Kind of built up a little bit like, okay, because the
yeah,
last thing you also want to do is have your marketing and your ideas constantly being filtered by other people, I think, you know what I mean? Because that's not going to make you feel good. And that, I mean,
mhm,
yeah. So,
yeah.
um,
One thing that I like to kind of think about too is, I think it's a great forcing mechanism. Is, you know, for us in our board meetings, we have kind of, highlights, lowlights, and outlook, and
mm,
it's all has to be in one slide, and it's very short, and
nice.
we write things up, but it kind of the outlook section, right? I kind of think about that a lot, right? and
Yeah.
and then I think about, at the beginning of the quarter, what do I want to put in the highlight section? as well
Mm.
of the next board meeting. And you
Nice.
kind of
Yeah.
have to work your way backwards. And so I love this concept too that we started playing around which is themes as opposed to
Mm.
priorities and projects and specific deliverables, but really like kind of themes, right? So for
Yeah.
us, one
Yeah.
big theme this year was decreasing our reliance on paid channels, and not because we
Hmm.
wanted to do less, but because we wanted to get, free up resources that were starving off everything else that we wanted to invest in, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's like these big themes that if you can stick to them for more than a quarter, they also give you a lot of perspective, like you said, on what matters and what to say no to.
I think that's important too, because like if you prioritize themes, like you said, instead of like these individual tactical things, I think it also helps you psychologically too, right? Because then
Mhm.
you're just like, hey, I've got
Yep.
3 priorities. You know what I mean? For this next quarter. These are my 3 priorities. If a request comes in that doesn't somehow fit one of these 3 things, then what am I doing? Should I actually be working on it or not? Or at least it causes you to pause and think about it. You know what I mean? Like if it doesn't align with one of these 3 things, I really need to think about should that be fit into my day somehow, and
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing. And the other thing I was thinking about is you really have, and this is where me working for so long before I did this, I think helped, is you really have to be in tune with yourself and like, can you accurately estimate how long something is going to take you to do? You know what I mean? And can you accurately estimate the impact that that thing is going to have? And can you accurately figure out which things are, you know what I mean? Like, so you've got to have some ability to have a perspective, I'd say, on that as well, of
Yeah.
like what are those things
Yeah.
and what am I good at, you know what I mean?
Right.
And how long is something going to take me? Because that's a trap I've fallen into before too, is a lot of us are really optimistic, right? So we're like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that. And it's like
Yeah.
you can do all those things if you do them poorly. You know what I mean? Like, and really hastily. But and then also I think it comes to like that focus, like if I can focus on a couple of things, then I'm probably going to do a better job at it too. And so I'm a big fan of,
Yeah.
and even at big companies, I was a big fan of talking about like, let's juggle 3 balls and then let's get perfected at that. Let's not try and juggle 7 balls and walk forward at the same time. Let's juggle 3 balls and run
Yeah.
forward. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then we're done with those 3 balls. Let's take the next 3 balls and let's juggle and run forward with them. And so,
And I think
yeah,
also COVID and us, like everyone being remote at once, makes it even harder. And I think something
yeah,
that I've tried to be really intentional about is auditing my calendar on a fairly regular basis and trying to be really intentional about the macro of my calendar. And what I mean by that is like what percentage of my time is heads down work of longer than 30 minutes, because if it's less than 30 minutes you're not going to get anything done.
exactly. Yep.
Uninterrupted deep work, right? What
Yep.
percentage of my time do I want it to be one-on-ones with my teams or with peers, with the CEO or whatever, right?
Yep.
What percentage of
Yep.
my time is recurring group meetings? And then, what percentage of my time is kind of what I like to call maintenance tasks, right? Like, which is Slack and email and communicating and,
Yeah.
things like that. And so if you can be intentional about that, that really helps. And one thing I actually started to do, which it's kind of a little hack for me, at least personally, is I actually use Google Calendar for every single minute of the day is tracked on at least
Nice.
15, but usually at most like 30-minute increments.
Yep.
So at the end of the week, I look back and I know, and I color code the whole thing. So I know exactly, and then I write down what I did.
Yep.
If at the end of the week, I'm feeling like, if I'm feeling energized, like, okay, I'm doing something well, right?
Yeah.
If at the end of the week, I'm like, oh man, I'm exhausted. It's like, okay, I'm doing
Yeah.
something wrong. I'm not enjoying my job this week,
Yep.
right? But COVID,
Yeah.
I think, made it a lot harder because what I started to notice is just meetings after meetings for every little thing, And
Yeah.
so if you can
Yep.
put mechanisms in place, I think, like, so for example, I actually block my entire Thursday, my entire Friday, and most of my mornings, which are my most productive time, right?
Nice. Yeah.
Now, not always does that get respected, but after a while,
Right.
like people start to get the message.
Yep.
And with my team, it's kind of the same thing. It's like enforcing things like, hey, is there an agenda for this? Like, what are you trying to
Yep.
accomplish with this? Can we do
Yep.
20-minute meetings instead of 30-minute meetings? Like, can you do
Yeah.
15-minute meetings instead? Like little things
Right.
like that, I
Yeah.
think can go a long way. It's like you got to figure it out now in these kind of new times.
I like that too, because it's kind of funny because I used Clockify for a while so
Oh,
that I
nice.
could actually
Yeah.
track, yeah, just like the things, and then I got out of practice, but it's been something I've been thinking about picking up again because um, the thing that I thought actually the one of the bigger benefits that I got from it was actually time boxing things. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like, well, how
exactly.
much time do I want to spend on this? And just being able to look at the clock and really quickly say like, oh, well, I'm over time. You know what I mean? Or oh, okay, I
Yeah.
need to like, or I've got 15 more minutes on this, so I better,
Yeah.
um, and it was kind of helpful. And so, cool. All right, let's pivot a little bit. So the next topic
Okay.
we've got is around. So all right, we're the single marketer. We're figuring out what we need to do. We're getting it done. And now we got some funding. We're about ready to make some hires. And so how do we think about the first couple of hires that we want to make, and how do we think about starting to build that team out? So what are some of your thoughts there?
Yeah. So I'm fairly biased towards if you're earlier in your role, right? Especially the first month or so, as much as you can, figure out how to get leverage on your time through people that are not full-time hires. Unless it's, you're bringing in kind of that right-hand person that you've worked with before, like
Yep.
there's kind of that level of like trust and you know exactly how that person operates and you guys, or, you all like interact pretty well and you just
Yep.
like know it, right?
Yep.
um
Yep.
so how I like to think about it is really kind of taking a step back. I think each company is different, right?
Yep.
So if it's a company that's a bit more self-serve model, more product led growth, and maybe smaller deal sizes versus enterprise, more complex, right? I think the approach is very different, but I tend to think about hiring around things that even if I could do it myself, I'm probably not the top 1% in the planet on this thing,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
That's how
Yep.
I kind of like to think about it.
Yep.
Um, and then even how you go about, I think, hiring and thinking about hiring also is going to depend on the company quite a bit, right? Like some companies, like at HashiCorp, we have this mentality of, hire the best talent, try to pay hopefully like top of market and, get them in as quickly as possible and kind of go from there. And we, at the stage that we were at, growing very fast, we needed people that knew things already, right? You didn't
Yeah.
want people
Right.
learning on the job, right?
Yep. Yep.
And other companies, it might be, you know what, like even though we got funding, we can't afford to hire someone like super senior for every role.
Yep.
So, what I try to do is hire a little bit more senior for roles that maybe I didn't grow up in, if you will, right? Like, for
Yeah.
example, I'm not a product marketer from the beginning, right?
Yep.
Like, I've never done
Yep.
product marketing as a full-time job in my career,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So I want to
Yep.
hire someone more seasoned there if I can,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
then there's other roles, like for example, demand gen growth and things like that, where hey, you know what? If I need to do this, I can do it myself, right?
Yeah.
And in those roles, I
Yeah.
feel a lot better still finding freelancers and contractors that give leverage on my time, but that I'm very confident in looking at the work and being able to tell very quickly, hey, is this the person that's gonna, continue to be the right person for this, right? Versus
Yeah.
like being a black box that some freelancer does, and you're like, I have no idea what this person is doing, right?
Yeah.
Um, so
Yep.
finding that balance is really important. But for me, kind of going back to your question, is usually like product marketing would be probably one of the first roles,
Yeah.
and then kind of building out from there, like your infrastructure, if you will, of your team. Another role that sometimes will fall in marketing and sometimes won't, that I usually like to hire, is kind of your systems meets process RevOps slash go to market systems and operations person,
Yeah.
someone that bridges the gap between data, customer data technology, and kind of your go-to-market operations, essentially
Yep.
defining your process from lead to cash collection. And
Mm-hmm.
ideally, not just marketing ops. Hopefully
Right.
that's your second hire. But if you have that person already, then yeah, absolutely bring in a marketing ops person. And those two are usually really tricky to find. Product marketing and anything related to go-to-market systems and
Mm-hmm.
operations find externally, because they're not going to be that invested in
Yeah.
it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I approach it the same way. I'd say like and this is the first time I've really had to think about it because most of my past leadership roles have been in operations, right? And so I've been very familiar with that function, all the functions in operations, how to find the right people, who to find. Oh, excuse me. My network was all in ops, and so it was pretty easy. But then when I landed here, it was like, okay, I need to compliment myself. That's the biggest thing. I need a big time compliment myself. So what do I think I'm good at? What do I think I'm good at? What do I think I'm not good at? What do I not like to do? What do I like to do? And being an ops guy, in my past, I thought, oh, I'm the ops guy. So I need to find, now I knew I needed to find somebody that could do more stuff, because I knew more of my time was going to need to be in meetings and stuff like that. So I knew I needed somebody but I thought like maybe they don't need to be as strong in operations, because I can kind of help them out. Luckily, I found somebody that was good at both, because I also was like what you said, I usually try and find like, who can I bring in that I've worked with before? You know what I mean? Because you have that trust, exactly how to work together. And I had like the worst experience. The two people that I really wanted to bring on at the time, they both kind of fell through. I was talking to both of them and like really far down with both of them, and they both fell through, and I was all upset and kind of, I want to say, a little emotionally upset,
Yeah.
Thank goodness Mark's going to listen to this. Mark, all that happened for a reason, because Mark
awesome.
got here. Yeah. And so luckily, like, I found my next kind of marketing partner. But what I realized after I hired him is I'm actually not that goddamn good at the ops stuff anymore. You know what I mean? I was like, shit, he is running circles around me. You know what I mean? And he doesn't proclaim
you're doing something right. If you're hiring people and they're smarter than you on something, that you're doing it right.
That's how I felt. I was like, man, that is great. And I just, try and let him shine in those areas and let him run with it, because that's, also important. And so, so that was kind of funny. But
that kind of reminds me too. It's like being very intentional about, am I looking for a generalist or a specialist at this stage?
Right. Yeah.
And at times, what I found is if you need a generalist and you think that's going to do, then there's probably less risk of finding that person full time. But if you need a specialist, oftentimes, especially if you're a smaller company growing, you can't afford to have 5 specialists, right? Like, especially things like performance and paid media, right? It's like, hey, you can't afford to hire somebody full-time for Facebook and LinkedIn and paid social, somebody full-time for SEM, you just can't do that, right? And so in those cases, you might want to go a little bit more towards, freelancers and contractors and specialists that can kind of bring in that really depth of expertise, and you're doing more of the orchestration of everything,
Speaking of that,